Welcome back, America. Leo Terrell, I want to welcome you to the program, one of my favorite guests. Leo, we have a prosecutor who's not that smart, but the system seems to be set up to help move him along. I look at this January 6th case, I see a violation of the First Amendment, Trump's free speech rights. I see a violation of the Fifth Amendment. When they took away his attorney-client privilege, I see a violation of due process there. I see a violation of the Sixth Amendment. When you have a judge that says we're going to ram this all into a 5-month period, a criminal case, they typically take 2.5, 3 years with discovery and everything else. She says, no, we'll do this in 5 months, the day before Super Tuesday. Sixth Amendment, the right to a competent counsel. Counsel said, we can't get this done. She said, sure you can. Also, she refuses to recuse herself, given her hyperbolic statements that she's made in other cases. But this prosecutor seems to be dragging the judiciary along with him. He's in a rush. He wants Trump tried, and he believes convicted of 4 phony charges during the course of the election to try and prevent Trump from being president. So then we're fighting over whether he does jail time or not. We're fighting over whether, in fact, he committed these crimes. But he's done something really, I think, outrageous here. It puts the Constitution and the office of the presidency on the line, and this is what I wanted to ask you. He files a brief with the Supreme Court. He says, look, Donald Trump is arguing that he is immune, even today, even as ex-president, from things he did as president. He thinks he's a king. So it's not in the public interest to let this go on and on. In fact, this needs to be resolved here and now. So Supreme Court, I want you to take an emergency appeal. I want to skip over the appellate court process because we're in a hurry here. I want you, the court, to take this argument and resolve it right now. Given the gravity of this case, given the fact that we actually want to hear from a circuit court and how they think this through, and the Supreme Court should take its time, what do you think of this?
You're too kind to Jack Smith. He's not a prosecutor. He's a Democratic operative. An operative in a position of power to basically try to create a railroad kangaroo court scenario of trying to convict President Trump prior to the election of 2024. And you're right. He's basically trying to get the Supreme Court, which I hope the Supreme Court does not take up. I mean, they're going to have some hearings, but I hope they refer this back down to the appellate court. Because we have to understand the rule of law is being circumvented because of politics. When people try to analyze this case and Jack Smith and that judge, who is also a Democratic operative, the rule of law is being dismissed, Mark. It's being ignored. Donald Trump's rights as a citizen, as a president, have been violated because the rule of law and justice is not important. What is the motivation? 30 years of practicing law. What's the motivation for Jack Smith to say, hey, Supreme Court, ignore the Court of Appeals. Ignore looking at case law and their rulings and their decision-making and the procedure. Why are we in a hurry? Because of November 2024. Because the Democratic Party is prosecuting this case. Not the Department of Justice, the Democratic Party. And I find it offensive. If this case is heard by the Supreme Court, it should be sent back to the Court of Appeals. The proceedings should stay and let the process work. Donald Trump was absolutely right. What they're doing to him, Mark, they will do to anyone who loves this country, who believes in the Constitution. They want to tear up the Constitution. They want to ignore the Constitution. You mentioned all those rights that were violated against Donald Trump. They don't care. They don't care because you know what it's all about, Mark? It's about power and control. The Democrats, the left wing, the progressive want power and control. And if we don't keep our eye on the Constitution, they will tear it up, destroy it, and they will say, hey, where is it? We lost it. They're not interested in the Constitution. They're not interested in keeping this country unique and separating us from being a banana republic.
Well said. Now, I want to emphasize a particular constitutional point here for the American people as well. President is immune from prosecution, not because the Constitution says so, because that's been the position of the Department of Justice for half a century. Why? Because the president is the executive branch. And if you allow an unelected prosecutor, an unelected judge, and an unelected jury to charge a president, to try a president, maybe convict a president, but even the process where an individual, just a common individual, has to spend an enormous amount of time to protect their liberty, to protect their life, to protect their career and their reputation. You know this. You can't function as a third branch of our government on matters of war, on matters of peace, on the border, and all these other things if you're having to defend your liberty. And it's been the position of the Department of Justice under Republican and Democrat attorneys general, you cannot indict a sitting president. So what does Jack Smith do when he sees this? So I'll indict an ex-president. I'll take the things that I assert he did while he was president. Here he is, he's not president anymore, and I will indict him on those things. That's how I'll get around it. And not only that, I'm going to skip the circuit court. I'm going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And court and John Roberts, I want a decision today. Now, let me say something about this. If he wins, then the office of the presidency is destroyed, because a president of the United States cannot function looking over his shoulders all the time, wondering what's going to happen when he ceases to be president of the United States. Because the party opposite, Leo, if they take control of the Department of Justice, then they will sit there and say, you know, this president shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have done this. They'll come up with real or cockamamie charges, and they will indict him. So the office of the presidency will never be the same. You know what Judge Chutkan says in response to that? Good. Well, maybe he'll be careful. No, not good. We shouldn't destroy our justice system, the office of the presidency, our Constitution, and separation of powers, because this bum, phony prosecutor is in a hurry to make his case in front of a Potemkin courthouse in order to get Donald Trump.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.